It's a Teen Talk Skating podcast where I embarrass myself. Hello, 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 and welcome to episode number 64 of the Teen Talks Gaming Podcast. My name is Van Gogh, and we have a very special episode. Not really special, but it is an episode that's a little weird because it is pre-recorded because I will be going on vacation, and so I need to pre-record 2 episodes for you guys so you guys don't get bored and cry because my voice is not in your ears, and I know it's really hard to survive without me, so I decided to go out of my way and pre-record 2 episodes just for you guys just so you have something, therapeutic to get through the week. Don't worry, more stuff will be coming soon. But yes, I am going on vacation. Don't also worry because don't worry, the stressed teenager in me is probably trying to enjoy the vacation. By the time you're hearing this episode when it first comes out, I think I will be at the airport, so I have no idea. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys are all doing very, very well. I hope everything's going well. My week, it's kind of been going normal. Nothing really exciting has really happened. But, I'm trying to like come to a conclusion with a lot of things in my life right now and like trying to make some decisions that I don't know if will like change my life forever or what, but I guess when you're a teenager, like everything feels like it's super important and it really is not. And that's what I'm trying to I'm gonna mess up. I'm gonna mess up 5 million times. Yeah. Anyway, let's go into our main episode before I get too sappy and you guys get too bored of me. But anyway, yeah, this is pre-recorded. Don't worry, episodes are not going to be pre-recorded in the future. The next one will be the one after that will be like normal, like always. I'm not stressed. I'm fine. Okay, people. Okay. Now it is time for your program of the week, as the theme song will say. Program of the week. Okay, so for your program of the week this week, just like the theme song said, I decided to pick a program that I think is very fitting to the episode because the episode that I'm going to talk about is all about ice dance, and this is an ice dance program. And this is from a team who I feel is literally so underrated that judges kind of forget they exist, and I do not because I'm like a loyal fan of them. And that team is Holly Harris and Jason Chan of Australia. You know what? Like, I actually don't care that the judges don't like them. I love them, and that's all that matters. And so, for this program today, I've decided to pick their 2022 free dance or no, 2023 free dance at the Shanghai Trophy, which is set to music by, I think it was Christian Reindl, if I'm saying that right. Forgive me if my pronunciation is wrong, but this is a very ocean themed program, if that makes sense. So it's called Ocean's Lullaby and Freya. So it is very ocean themed. I think what they're going for, in my opinion, is either mermaid and merman or like dolphin best friends. And I think both of them kind of work. So who cares? But this is a program very much ocean themed. You hear the sound of the waves, the wind across the waves, and they really do use that to their advantage in terms of like moving to the music because it's kind of like trying to emulate or like simulate the movement of the waves. Does that make sense? And I love that idea for them. Specific moments in this program, the opening stationary lift is so beautiful. I love their element when Holly Harris is like stands on Jason Chan's knees and they kind of spin around, and it looks so cool going up and then going down is so graceful. The 1 foot step sequence is not usually an element I point out a lot in ice dance programs, but it is an element that I will point out here because it is so beautiful. Again, kind of goes with the music, with the ebb, the flow and ebb of the waves. It's just it fits right with the ocean theme music. There is a minor mistake on the Twizzlers, but actually, who cares? I don't care. Artistically, it's beautiful. And then as we start getting into the later half of the program, I love the curve lift plus curve lift that they do. It's really beautiful. Gosh, I'm trying to think. They do a really cool hydro blade moment where she kind of like like, lays down next to him, and then she's also the first one that gets up, but then for a moment, they're laying back, and they're both looking at the ceiling, and, like, again, it's giving, like, mermaid, merman, dolphin best friends kind of vibes, but, like, we're, like, gonna survive together through, like, thick and thin or something, like, it's great. And then the epic moment of the program is definitely the character step sequence at the height of the music, where it starts really getting exciting, kind of there lots of dynamic movements, again, lots of, like, ocean wave movements, playing off of each other's character. Jason Chan like gets down on the ice. He kind of like does a few more hand movements, and it's a really great program. Ending with that character set sequence that's really powerful. And yeah, just overall a really good solid program. Vibe wise, it just fits the ocean wave theme, the ocean, dolphin, mermaid, merman. I've said that like 5 times already, guys. But yeah, it really does fit that vibe really well. And I really do enjoy that kind of feeling of, like, being in that moment with them, and if that makes sense, like, being in that moment, and, like, it does feel so interactive, you really do feel like you're in kind of an ocean environment, and it does feel good, it just feels it's a solid program, it's a good program, and you should go watch it. So, please go check it out after this episode. Holly Harris and Jason Chan, their 2023 Shanghai Trophy Free Dance. Go check it out after you listen to the main episode. But yeah, now it's time for the main episode. That makes sense. Yeah. That was your program of the week. Okay, everybody. So for this episode, I am doing a video essay episode. There are tons of these to come in the off season, especially as we're getting obviously closer to the end of the figure skating season. The 2024-2025 season is coming to an end, which is crazy because I just said that a year ago about the 2023-2024 season, and it feels like that was yesterday. But I am getting very old. My hairs are growing gray, but you know what? There's always time for a good old video essay episode. And yeah, as I said, there's going to be lots of these in the summertime when we don't really have a lot of figure skating content to watch or any competition to talk about. So I'm going to do a lot of video essays for sure. I always have good ideas going in my head about what videos I want to do, what kind of like thoughts I have about the sport, the issues surrounding the sport, etc. And for this episode, I've decided to focus on ice dance. Like I said earlier in the program of the week about Holly Harris and Jason Chan, that program was kind of perfect for this week's episode because I'm doing a video essay episode about ice dance and how ice dance is very political as a discipline, which, you know, might not make sense automatically, but I'm very sure that we will all get there in the end about why I think ice dance is the most political discipline, if that makes sense. Starting off, I would say that ice dance is definitely seen as the most beautiful discipline. There's romance, there's drama, the etc. But you know, it does hide things beneath its very beautiful facade. Compared to other disciplines like singles and pairs, there's rarely any falls or major mistakes for sure. Minor mistakes do occur, but you know, big falls, big dramatic deductions, and other things like that, they don't really happen in singles or in ice dance. They more so happen in singles and pairs where you know, falls matter a lot in terms of points and everything. But in ice dance, it's very much expected that these pairs or these couples are kind of perfect. They're kind of always kind of flawless. They're always doing pretty good. And so it is kind of seen as the most beautiful discipline because of that. It's pristine. There's rarely mistakes, but it does hide things for sure. And so that stereotype of that kind of virtue Moyer level of romantic tension, chemistry that we always kind of see as a stereotype, you know, that kind of stereotype that ice dance is very passionate and it's very like romantic, and those edits that we see about like, you know, like the heavy makeup and the drama, it's, you know, it's there for sure. That is a huge element of ice dance, but it isn't just that isn't what ice dance just is. Ice dance is a whole discipline that gets very technical and gets very artistic, but it does get very political. And so in this episode, I want to explain why ice dance is often touted as the most political discipline in figure skating. Um, why these kind of politics matter a lot more than they do in singles and pairs, how these kind of politics gonna go in to ice dance, how they appear, and if there is like a big major solution to it. And so that's what I'm gonna talk about in this episode, about why ice dance is political. Can we stop it? How is it political? Can we do anything as fans and things like that? Anyway, So buckle in, everybody, because Iceland's politics are way more interesting than US politics right now. Just kidding. It is, it is, I should probably do my little, public service announcement and say that, yes, paying attention to local politics, national politics in your country, it's important too. But to me, figure skating politics is just a little bit more interesting. I gotta admit, I really can't care about tariffs. I'd rather care about people, I don't know, bribing judges or something. I don't know. Okay. Sorry, guys. I mean, that was a bit of a politically charged comment, but it is the politics episode for sure. Okay, so first point is why politics in ice dance even exists. And I don't think that this should be like a shock. I feel like this isn't not a shock because figure skating is a judge sport. There is bias in the sport. It's hard to say. It would be hard. It would be impossible to say and unfair to say that there's no bias in this sport because there is bias in this sport. It's, let's just get out of the way. Sorry, it's not petite and wrapped up in a napkin for you. No, I'm unwrapping it like right now. Figure skating is an unfair sport because it is biased. It's judged. It's biased. Even if we don't want it. And what I mean by that is like unconscious bias, subconscious bias. People who study psychology, I don't know if you're out there, but help me, please. That kind of thing exists too. Like, even if you aren't being biased explicitly and saying, I'm from France, I'm a judge from France, the skaters are from France, I want to give them more points. Like, that's bias, that's obvious bias. Is that really happening? Probably not, but it's kind of like unconscious bias, if that makes sense. And why does it come out a lot in ice dance for sure is because ice dance is harder to see who is better than who. Because again, like I said in the kind of the introduction of this episode, it's very hard to see falls in ice dance, and it's very hard to see any mishaps, baubles in ice dance. In figure skating, in terms of like singles and pairs, you see falls on the throws and the jumps. Maybe there's a mistake on a spin someone makes. Maybe it's like off center or anything like that. Ice dance is hard to see what team is better than who, because there is a very usual lack of falls or other mistakes. And also, I will say, because there's two people on the ice and not just one. And if you're paying attention to two people on the ice, especially when they're like right next to each other, that's a lot harder to compare between another pair or another couple. And you might argue with me that, yeah, pairs also has two people, but in pairs, the elements are quite separate. There's not too many elements that are there's not as many elements that are like the same, that the both partners are doing the same. The side by side jumps, yes, but like the throw jumps, for example, or the lifts, like it's very distinct which partner like is doing what in terms of that. But ice dance is a little more confusing because you have like the combination spin, you got the twizzles, the 1 foot step sequence, the midline step sequence, other elements that the couple usually does the same at the same time. The lifts, yeah, again, the lifts are maybe a little different, but again, it's just hard to see with two people on the ice kind of doing the same exact thing. Like, is that team that I just saw better than the team I just saw like 2 teams ago? Or like, okay, wait, I don't know if like the skating skills of this team were better than the skating skills of the last team, or okay, maybe their stationary lift was like deserved more Julie, but I'm at the same time I feel like it was the same. I don't know. It's things like that that really kind of get very loosened, I feel like, in terms of ice dance judging. And of course, things like GOE and components are a lot more important because, again, if everybody is skating kind of the same with the same elements, then things like creative execution and components are going to be the things that determine who wins what, who places where. And these things are judged. I'm not saying that the ISU system is completely biased for sure, because as you guys know, you have like a code of points system where it like, tells you what element, how much GOE you should probably give it, depending on certain like bullet points or criteria that the element gets. It's a whole complicated system. But even then, I will say, I feel like people are very like, they observe the bias. They see it and they're like, you know what? I think that was a little, I don't know. I think I would have had this team above this team. I think this team got a little boost because of their country, their flag, the next to their name, things like that. So I'm not saying that judges are intentionally biased and they're intentionally trying to make certain skaters win and certain skaters lose. but it does kind of like seep through sometimes. It kind of just like get to you in a way. I don't know how to explain it, but that's how I think it works. And how? Okay, so how does politics really get into ice dance? It's really small things. Um, that is not cheating, but it's like bias. It's small things like, a team getting higher components, even though maybe they kind of have the same level of skating skills of the eye, maybe, or like a little bit more dewy, like plus one more, minus one more, etc. Obviously, it cannot be super obvious again because this is a discipline where everyone's kind of skating the same, and so you can't really like say like one team is better than the other like by like 10 points. You know what I mean? If they're like skating the exact same way and the exact same style and things like that, you can't really be that that obvious, but it's a little like, 0.5 more, 0.6 more, things like that. Um but yeah, as I said, sometimes unconscious bias can definitely play in as well. Side note, I would love to see some kind of like psychological analysis of figure skating judging if anyone's up to that. Obviously, I'm not a psychologist, but I would love to see kind of that thing happening if possible. But I will say that there are three main forms of politics in figure skating and ice dance as well. Um, the first one is definitely figure skating in general, but the other two are more ice dance, I feel like, because they're very specific to ice dance. And yeah, let's get started with them. So the first form, I don't know what I'm saying. The first form of politics that I see in figure skating is what I'm gonna call nation politics or country politics, which does occur in every figure skating discipline, so it's not as important, I guess, but it is still apparent. For a very long time in this where there has been a large conversation around large federations versus smaller ones. What I mean by that is that a country like the USA or Japan has a lot more figure skating infrastructure and funds and support than a country that is a little smaller and not as big in figure skating like Belgium or the Netherlands or Kazakhstan or anything like that. Now, obviously, that does not mean skaters from these countries cannot win medals just because they're from smaller countries. We've always seen that disproved, like skaters like Luna Hendricks of Belgium in the women's singles, Mikhail Shidorov from Kazakhstan in the men's singles. They have won very big medals, world medals, European/four continents medals. So I'm not saying that it's not possible, because it is definitely possible. In Iceland specifically, this kind of does play on country politics because the flag next to someone's name in an Iceland's country is kind of important because the federation will kind of push certain teams. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like federations, like let's the American Federation, they will push. They will push certain teams onto like the international stage. And I guess that does kind of occur within countries, I guess, domestically, pitting one team against another and using more political influence that way. But internationally, they will like push teams forward to go compete internationally. On the judging panel side, they're like, oh, they're from America, they must be good, they must, you know even though they might not be as good, they must be like good because they're American. The flag next to the name is American. That's a USA red, white, and blue. You know what I mean? Like it isn't obvious, but this does occur. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. um but yeah, again, with the large federation and smaller federations, I feel like behind the scenes, it's like more influence versus less influence on judging panels. In terms of like the bigger countries usually have a lot more political power, if that makes sense, and the smaller countries don't have a lot of political power in Iceland, so therefore they don't get as much influence on the judging panels. And so teams from those bigger countries are benefited, teams from the smaller countries not as much by nation politics. And obviously this is very like discreet stuff. Like I'm not saying like it's public info, but like it's a little inferred sometimes, I feel like, by me and like by figure skating fans. Yeah, some ice dance teams are only getting the placements they're getting, not only, but their placements are a little bit affected by the country they're from. and they might be a little lower. Another team should be a little higher. That might be from a smaller federation. But I'm not trying to discredit, as always. We're not trying to discredit any of the hard work skaters put in or anything. It is kind of just a main analysis of the judging itself, not obviously discrediting the skaters' hard work, the time, the dedication, the money that they put into it. Um, that is a very big factor as well. But in general, I do feel like the flag next to a team's name can often influence their placement for sure. Even if just like subconsciously or unconsciously, as I said earlier, that can be kind of a determining factor. Okay, the next form of politics that I want to talk about after nation politics is camp politics. And by a camp, I mean like coaches, which are kind of everything in ice dance. Because usually in ice dance, it's not usually like just one coach that someone has, it's usually multiple coaches, which does happen in singles as well. Though I feel like sometimes in singles, they just only have one coach. But by a camp, I mean there's like multiple coaches. Like they have a whole like team around an ice dance couple. They have a whole like team around them, like a whole like support staff and medical staff and coaches and choreographers and physical therapists and things like that. Like it's a camp. That's a camp. And camps are kind of everything in ice dance. Ice dance is a very campy discipline. Ha ha ha. That was not funny. I'm sorry. But I don't know why I say it like that. So you might have heard about some of the major ice dance camps, like the International Academy. Ice Dance Academy of Montreal. Is that what they called? IAM, right? You might have heard of MIDI or MIDI, the Michigan Ice Dance International Academy, right? You might have heard of IAM and their sister campus in London, Ontario, I think it is. So that's IAML for or O. I don't know. Things like that. You might have heard of like specific coaches like Maurizio Mangaglio of Italy. He has a camp with some of the Finnish skaters and I think Spanish skaters, I believe. And so there's a lot of like ice dance camps where it's one coach or a set of coaches that are like there. Like so many teams are there though, like concentration. You know what I mean? Like there's like for example at IAM in Montreal, like we know that there's so many teams there. There's like 20 teams there. I forgot. I think at the Beijing Olympics, out of all the teams competing in the ice dance event, they had at least half or something, more than half of the teams competing there training in Montreal. Like the ones that were competing in Beijing at the Olympics, they had all trained in Montreal. And so that really shows you like where they are like concentrated. Whereas I'll give you kind of the other example in singles, where singles has way more coaches from all over the world because a lot of single skaters tend to stay with their childhood coaches or they go to famous coaches like Tammy Gamble or um, Brian Orser or Mihamada. You know what I mean? But despite there is like these popular coaches, that these like famous coaches that a lot of people go to, but there are still a ton of like smaller teams with or smaller skaters with smaller, lesser known coaches or more coaches from childhood, things like that. Whereas in ice dance, it's like you have to be at one of these big major camps if you want to get any form of success. That's like kind of what it feels like at the like sometimes. And you're kind of fighting for the camp like politics because again, if there's so many teams in one camp and the camp has a lot of political power, they can only spread that out like so thin. Does that make sense? Because like you can't just like willy-nilly give it to anybody. You got to give it to the teams who like kind of all are in there. And I know a lot of this is a lot of theoretical and obviously not a lot of this has been kind of said out loud, but it is very a political discipline and a camp using their politics to kind of boost one of their skaters and be like, hey, like this skating team deserves a little bit, more or less or anything. And so that does push for a lot of rivalry within the camps, obviously, to fight for the political power and rivalry between camps. So, we often, I sometimes I'll see like posts pitting one ice dance camp against another because there's so like few of them that they kind of battle each other. Like, okay, which camp's teams are better? Do you like I am more because of Chalk and Bates and La La La, or do you like, you know, do you like, I don't know who else there is. Do you like Margaglio's camp better because of Julia Tequila and Matthias Vicious or things like that? Rivalries between the camps pushing that political influence onto their skaters and onto their teams in order to get better results. That's the main point of all these politics, is to get better results, even though they might not be better results in the way that they maybe intend to get better results, if that makes sense. So, a little bit questionable sometimes, but it happens. The last one that I want to talk about, the last form of politics that I want to talk about, is probably the one that gets most discussed, and therefore I feel like it's also the one that is the most controversial, and that is what I call age politics. And age politics are the idea that the longer a team stays in the sport, a longer a team stays in the sport, they form a partnership and they stay in the sport of ice dance, the more political power they get, and therefore the more points they get. Or they just get more points because they've been around longer and age equals points. I guess that's what we're encouraging, is that skaters stay in the sport for longer, they get more points. Now, again, is this very like obvious? No, but it does tend to happen, and I'll explain. So for example, a team that stays longer and they compete together longer often rises to the top, maybe near the end of their career. The current world's podium, for example, Chalk and Bates, for example, is a good team of this, for example, because I've said, for example, like 5 times. Because Chalk and Bates, they didn't start off like winning every single competition and winning every single medal at every single competition like they have recently. It's only since maybe the 2022 Olympics that they started really boosting their reputation and boosting morale, because they ended up being kind of the oldest, not the oldest team, but they ended up being the team that had stayed in the game for the longest, the team that had, pushed the longest, whereas, the teams before them, like Papadakis Cizeron, Hubble and Donahue, or even going back to like 2018, the Shibutanis, the Shipsips, or oh gosh, who else is there? Virtue and Moyer, because those teams had retired, Chalk and Bates were able to rise to the top, if that makes sense. Not necessarily that Chalk and Bates like improved by such a drastic amount that they, became better skaters, although they are obviously better skaters, and I don't want to discredit any of their hard work or anything. But a lot of times people say that it's more because of age and ice dance. And obviously it's not just Chalk and Bates. Tons of teams that have done this forever. I don't want to target just them because they are an amazing team and I don't want to discredit any of their work. But a lot of people will say that so and so is only at the top of their pinnacle or the top of their career because they've stayed in the sport for longer, if that makes sense. Obviously, again, it happens with a lot of teams, not just Chalk and Bates. So, and we're talking competing about like a decade or decade and a half kind of thing. Like older teams that compete for a decade or so will get their success at the end of that decade. It's not like at the beginning they're just stars already. No, you gotta like it's a game of waiting, and this game of building up like morale and kind of building up reputation with the judges who will see you over and over and over again. So, and that's why I feel like it is hard to rise up in the beginning for newer teams, newer senior teams, and teams that have just come up with from singles. So you'll see in ice dance usually that the ice dance couples that are like junior world champs, they usually don't have like a crazy rise to seniors like might happen in singles, for example. Like, for example, Ian Malinin won the 2022 world junior title, and then he ended up being like a crazy phenomenon in seniors the season after. But another team, an ice dance team that becomes junior world champ, is not like guaranteed to suddenly become the senior world champ. That it makes sense because they're young. They just came up to seniors. They gotta play the waiting game. They gotta wait around and be patient and keep on training until it's their turn. And in terms of their turn, it's when it's near probably the end of their career where they are older, they've gained a lot more experience, they've grown a lot more reputation, and therefore a little bit more power and favor with the judges, if that makes sense. Um, and that's like a gradual process. It's not a process that can happen super overnight. These judges are waiting for you to kind of like grow up and like age up. And so then, oh yeah, you are a lot more mature skater now. You got better expression and skating score skills and composition. I just think you guys, this couple right here, they've grown so much from their junior ranks. Now is the time we give them top 10. Now is the time we give them top 8. Now is the time we give them top 5. Now is the time they're on the podium. And then now is the time they're world champ. It does come in phases, if that makes sense. It does seem to really appear to come in phases and not really like snap. Like you are world champ. I know you were just junior champ last season. You're world champ now. No, it never happens like that. You will. I don't know. I don't know what the last. I don't really know if that's ever happened. If a world junior team has ever gotten from the gold at juniors to like senior gold the next year. Probably not. Am I saying that age is everything in this sport or in ice dance? No, because exceptions have occurred. Gabriela Papadakis and Guillaume Cizeron is a good example of that. They were quite young and quite new to the senior ranks when they had their very meteoric rise to the top, if that makes sense. When they became world champs, I think in 2015 or 2016 it was 2015. That was quite a like meteoric rise for sure. So those do occur, but they are kind of like once in a very, very blue moon. Um, and so, and so it's not impossible to become a younger team and still make it to the top, but it is kind of it's a waiting game at ice dance. It's like age is usually what gets you better results. I hate to say that because it's like age and time thing by. Obviously there are exceptions. Like another good exception would be probably Olivia Smart and Tim Deek from Spain, who just formed a partnership last season. And now they are definitely building up a very big rise. They were third at the free dance at Worlds, for example. Um, and so that's an example of a newer team, not like a young team, but a newer team, a newer partnership, still gaining a lot of like political influence, if that makes sense. And that it does occur. I will say age, this is very controversial because the teams that are more maybe deserving in a way of better results, that maybe have better skating skills and maybe better components, and they should get a little bit more Jewy than some teams that have been around a bit longer than them. Those younger teams are not really getting the points that people think they deserve or getting the reputation or favor with the judges that other people think they deserve, because again they are a more young team, they are a more maybe inexperienced team with not a lot of accolades to kind of back them up, if that makes sense. It's not their time yet. I feel like is what ice dance officials say. It's not your time to be the great one yet. You know what I mean? Is it unfair? I definitely do think it is, because you do have teams that maybe make a lot more of an artistic impact than some other teams, and yet they're getting a little less score. Or you have teams whose twizzles are a bit maybe a lot cleaner than other teams, but yet they're still getting lower levels. Does it make sense? Like, it is unfair. um it is unfair, right? And this all again ties back to those mistakes, because with the lack of mistakes in ice dance, it's very easy to kind of just say like, okay, this team's better than this team because they are older and they've had more competitive experience. Not necessarily that like, okay, this team made better, like they made less bubbles in their step sequence or their twizzles. It's not necessarily that. It's more age and experience that matters more in ice dance. And this has been called out a lot of by people in the past. So really great job, figure skating community, for pointing that out for sure. And so I do feel it is unfair in a way. It is unfair that people are kind of judged, or skaters couples are judged by their age and not their oh, I'm yawning, sorry guys, and not their real true skill for sure. And this does happen again in singles, but in singles you have kind of different cases with age, and you have different cases because of the jumps and the spins, etc., that can still be clean, and when not everybody is clean. But in ice dance, it's very subjective. It's the most subjective discipline, and it will continue to be that unless we make major changes, which leads us to the next segment. Can we stop it? Can we stop it? Can we stop these kind of inequalities or unfairness that is kind of happening at ice dance because of the country bias, the camp bias, and the age bias? I literally just talked about that one. How did I forget it? No idea. Can we stop it as fans, as the fans of and the audience of figure skating? Now, this is kind of one of those occasions where I feel like little can be done by fans specifically because fans have done things by obviously calling out the results of things, right? Calling out that, maybe so and so should have done better, their twizzles or their subsequence, fans have done their job, I feel like. And unfortunately, I don't see like a possible way that fans can make a huge, huge impact on the judging of ice dance specifically. Obviously, there is a different case with the singles disciplines and the pairs disciplines because of the nature of those disciplines. But in ice dance, I feel like it's hard to say that the fans can make any like significant changes because if you were to make a change in ice dance to prevent less bias somehow, to prevent less country politics and camp politics and age politics. You would have to change the culture of the sport entirely. And that is a hard thing to change. Culture is a hard thing to change. You know what I mean? Culture is not easy to be changed at all. And for sure, when a sport has been kind of used to that, if that makes sense, used to this kind of treatment and this kind of judging and this kind of system for so long, it does kind of beg the question, like, like, is this really like what we want? And is this really like how we should act? But a culture is hard to change for sure. And if we did change it, there's no saying that bias could kind of reappear again somehow, if that makes sense. That's not a guarantee for sure. Okay. Now, obviously, we've changed this judging system once to eliminate some bias. If you remember, I feel like I need to do an episode about this. If you remember at the 2002 Winter Olympics back in Salt Lake City about the pairs event being kind of like cheated and the judges being very biased and, kind of buying votes in a sense under the very old 6.0 system of grading figure skating, scoring figure skating, and how there was a huge scandal around it because the French judge was being told to like exchange votes or kind of like mark one team better than another because of la 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 la. After we had the 6.0 system, we changed the 6.0 system to the current system, the COP, the Code of Points system, and I guess we are in the IJS era, right? The International Judging System or something. I don't know, but obviously we've changed the judging system once to eliminate bias because of the French judge and the scandal that came along at the 2002 Winter Olympics. We changed that system once to eliminate bias. Can there be more changes to it? Are we going to have a major, massive change to the ISU scoring system? We will definitely have to find out on that. That's a huge maybe. There hasn't been a big scandal in ice dance for a while, so it's not like I don't think anything major will happen unless something major happens, like a really big scoring scandal. I cannot see this happening like at all. Really, I cannot really see that we will stop entirely watching ice dance and we will stop judging ice dancing like that. Very extreme kind of way of thinking that I don't think is gonna actually happen, but we'll definitely have to find out. I did talk about in an episode a long time ago. This is kind of a random point, but bringing AI or any type of like adaptive motion sensor ish technology into figure skating to help track levels or track features of an element. That is something that people have brought up multiple times. Again, it's a logistic thing of money, but if they're able to implement AI or technology or this motion sensor idea into the ice or into the skates or something to track how well skaters are doing or if they're hitting all their key points or things like that in ice dance, sure, let's add it. But is it gonna work? Is it gonna cost a lot of money? That those are the two big questions I think the ISU has to ask if they were able to implement that for sure. Ugh, my burps. Sorry, guys. And so, if we were able to change the judging system to fit AI and technology, that would hope to be a whole different story. I will say I do think most change has to come from the athletes themselves, or the judging panels, or the coaches, or the ISU. The fans themselves, I feel like, do have very little to say on judging matters, which is unfortunate, right? Because when a competition is done, it's kind of done. When you see that score in a kiss and cry, it's kind of done. It doesn't really change ever unless they somehow made some random mistake, but it doesn't change like ever. The fans have little to say on judging matters, and so in terms of the scores, can we really change it? Not really, especially in a sport like ice dance that is a little bit more bias kind of sprinkled in everywhere. There is not really room to kind of argue. There is not really room to kind of say, I want this instead of that kind of thing. And so that is kind of the unfortunate thing about ice dance for sure, is understanding that. But I will say, change may come when another big scandal happens. I hate to say it, that change will only come when a big scandal will happen. Like, that's kinda how it works though in figure skating, is that, like, change comes when a big scandal happens, and so, if there's a huge scandal in ice dance in the next in my lifetime, which maybe there will be, and there's a huge scandal in ice dance in my lifetime, I could see it changing. Like, I don't know what the scandal would be, it's just some unfair cheating or something, some bias, some type of, like, age bias, or I have no idea, but if that were to happen and it was recognized, especially by the international press, not just in figure skating, but also outside of figure skating, if it were recognized in all of figure skating and out in just global general public stuff as well, then I think some change would happen. But for right now, I think the changes have to come from athletes or the judging panels or coaches in the ISU themselves, who need to fix their idea of ice dance and fix their idea of what is better than what, because based on what we've talked about today, obviously the nation bias and the camp bias and the age bias, they seem like pretty immediate causes, if you will, that like a lot of people would kind of understand if you try to graph this information. I don't know. I would love to see like a graph of like age of couple versus score that they got at Worlds or something like that. Would it kind of go up? I have no idea, but maybe it would. That's what I'm saying. I feel like maybe it would. That it would like, hey, older equals more points. Not necessarily, but like I feel like it kind of would go that way. And so, again, one of those rare opportunities where, say, like, we as fans can't really do much about it, but I'm thinking athletes, the coaches, the ISU, they can do something about it. And they need to recognize that it's an issue, first of all, because I feel like in the current state ice dance is now, where it's been relatively calm, there's not been any major scandals or anything. In the state ice dance is now, it does seem quite like normal. It does seem quite nothing's gonna go wrong. But again, the moment the next big scandal breaks out, which I feel like is going to be soon, and I hate to say that, the moment a big scandal comes out, the sport will change. We've seen that multiple times over the last years, decades, etc. That when something bad happens, it will change. And when something bad happens in ice dance, I think it will change. And so that was kind of it for this episode about the politics of ice dance. I know it was a little bit on the shorter side, but that's a-okay, because that was all I could think about, not gonna lie. That was all I could think about to talk about. I feel like I could have done more, but I didn't write as many notes, I guess. Sorry, everybody. But yeah, the politics of ice dance, kind of to summarize everything, is incredibly important to kind of understand ice dance as a whole. Because when you understand if one team is better than the other, what really sets them apart? Is it really that they're better than one another, or is it really like politics and bias coming in to sweep them in? Bigger federations versus smaller federations, the bigger camps versus the smaller camps, inter-camp rivalries, intra-camp rivalries, crazy stuff. Age politics, being older equals more points, being younger makes it harder to break through. All these ideas are very crucial to understanding the sport of ice dance, how it's governed, how it's managed, and why skaters get certain scores. So it really is not just about the technical side. It's not just about the technical side. It's not just about the artistic side. It's sometimes about the political side. That's a little more hidden and a little bit more of a hidden agenda underneath the mere fabric of this ice dance discipline. And yeah, that is all for this week's episode, everybody. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. I hope you guys can leave me your thoughts on the politics of ice dance as well. I hope I was able to explain everything thoroughly and clearly and not rant like I do for 50 minutes because I'm a teenager who needs I don't know, I need someone to shut my mouth like half the time because I say things I regret. But sometimes I say things I think I will regret and I don't regret them because I got them out. Thanks. Sorry to rant at the very end about my life. Okay, next week would normally be the review of the World Team Trophy, but I am going to be on vacation again, or not again, but I'm gonna be on vacation during the like World Team Trophy, and so I won't get to see it. I won't get to see the results, or I will see the results, but I won't get time to write down all the results so I can make an episode on them. So it will be likely some type of video essay slash season wrap up episode. I'm thinking about doing an episode on a specific skater and analyzing their journey. That will also be pre-recorded episode. But don't worry, I will be discussing the World Team Trophy results for sure. That will probably occur, I think, when that episode comes out. That episode will come out on in May at the 3rd of May, which I know is kind of late because World Team Trophy literally ends this week and not 2 weeks from now. But that's probably when I'm gonna record that. Sorry for ranting so much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Teen Talks Teen Podcast. My name is Vango. I will see you next week for another video essay season wrap up. I have no idea. I will be on vacation. I hope you guys get a good vacation into, not gonna lie. And bye bye.